Fabulous. Morning, guys. How we doing? Again, my anal retentive sound check there. I do apologize, but right now I'm not sure any other way to do that. We're going to finish up here in chapter 29 today, and then we get into the prep for Wednesday for your quiz, and then we start talking about the test prep stuff that you guys are going to be doing here pretty much until Memorial Day. So, and then after. The big things about today is two things. First of all, I almost owned a telecommunications company yesterday in the fact that ripping Cox cable, a new one, I just, I don't know what it is. I have no earthly idea how or why this kind of stuff happens, but it's like, they have been working on our internet here, basically the television internet. It's the same signal and then it's split at a box. I know way more about this than I should. For almost a year, and we still can't get it right. And it's like yesterday, we had nothing. I had no internet where I could even connect because the internet signal was so slow and it wouldn't even connect to anything. So I have reset, unplugged all these boxes more times than I can count. This morning, nothing, no anything. I unplugged, plugged in the boxes, and I've got screaming internet this morning, and I have no idea why. It's just the craziest thing. I have no idea. So we're going to go ahead and play school here while we can. So that's something. Oh, also, there may be an interruption here today. If you hear dogs barking and stuff like this, it's just because there was supposed to be work here at the house that was done yesterday and nobody showed up. So one of these people are supposed to show up this morning. We'll see. But anyway, just letting you know that little tidbit. With that, aloha. How we doing? Huh? All ready? Okay. All right, we're going to wrap this up here. So with this, we're going to leave our lovely pool setting here. And we're going to dive right back into the text here, finishing up on chapter 29. One of the things, again, as you're reading the materials here, and you have no doubt remembered all of these things that I have shared with you about the information in italics in the margins, solid gold. So if you look at this and you're talking about what, for instance, if you have turn coordinator issues, if the gyro spools down on the wing leveling component there of your turn coordinator, remember the ball still works. The ball still indicates coordinated flight. And if your heading indicator or your compass is stable and that's constant and that ball is centered, then your wings are leveled. Why is this important? Well, enter the next phase here. What do we do if we have a complete gyro failure? You guys will remember that we have a no gyro approach, and you remember what kind of how that works. And you have ATC talking you through it. Providing that you have a working radio, this is still something that ATC can help you with. But you need to know what you're looking at in order to make sure that your wings are level and you're heading in a right direction here. So if you look here at figure 29.8, one of the things that you're going to be looking at is looking at what happens when your gyros fail. Remember what your gyro system is and your pedostatic system is. Your attitude indicator, heading indicator, and your turn coordinator, with the exception of the ball, those are all going to be X'd out. And in this type of an aircraft, if all of those gyros fail, you will have covered them up. Now you're looking at your pedostatic instruments, your power instruments, and your compass, and the ball. So what you're needing here now is ATC, you're either needing some ATC help, or you need to turn to a direction where you know you can find VFR weather. And by the way, that's another thing, useful little tidbit is that when you're flying in the clouds, is having an understanding as to say, okay, if everything fails here now, I lose my gyros and whatever, where do I turn to find clear skies if it exists, to find clear skies and to, oh, I had something here. Again, guys, extraneous noises here in the background. I hear, let's try this again. Stand by. Pardon me whilst I sip. Kona blend. The Kona blend is starting to taste a little more ashy these days. Google it. Knowing where VFR weather is so that you know that if you lose your gyros, what general direction you could turn to find better weather. And if your radios fail, is that if you have a radio failure and everything else, it's like, okay, now what? Number one, don't panic. Breathe. Figure it out. You're going to figure it out. You will have trained for this. And to understand what you do, squawking 7600, and you're turning toward VFR weather where you know that weather is, but in that turn, knowing how to make those turns. So when we look back here, is that if we're looking at our no gyros here, even though that we may be holding that altitude per se, remember what happens in a turn. In a turn, we are going to bleed off a little airspeed. So we see that our airspeed indicator here is starting to get a little bit lower. We're maintaining our altitude here, but we're noticing that we're getting a gradual turn here to the left. And you can see this here because you have gone from west here to a heading of about somewhere around, what is that, 260? So we're starting to make a little turn to the left. Also keep in mind that your heading indicator will turn one way, your compass will turn the other. Your compass will turn kind of opposite, kind of what you're thinking, if you're thinking about your compass turning in relation to your heading indicator. The thing is that you want to keep those wings level. You'll know your wings are level when your compass isn't moving. So that's what I wanted to show you there in figure 29.8, and I was having this thing freezing here. Straight and level on a partial panel. This is going to be a thing here where you want your airspeed constant on a particular power setting. You've got your wings level here. Now let's say that you're missing your attitude indicator and your heading indicator. Well, here, this is what we're looking at here for primary for pitch. Primary for pitch is going to be your altimeter. Supporting that is going to be your VSI, right? So that's kind of what that's going to be. If you notice the hands swinging counterclockwise here, what does that tell you? The hands are swinging counterclockwise. That means you're descending. That means you would also see your airspeed probably pick up a little bit if you haven't changed your power. If these hands are moving clockwise, you're climbing, and you'll also see your airspeed indicator starting to decrease slightly, and your VSI will start indicating a climb or descent, right? So the heading part here, this again is assuming that that your attitude indicator and your heading indicator have failed, these two gyroscopic instruments. Those two have failed. You still have your turn coordinator, which is good. So in this case, again, this is what we're looking at here. And by the way, your compass is your supporting bank instrument. Why is that your supporting bank instrument? Well, remember what happens when you begin to bank. Your heading is going to change a little bit, right? So that's kind of what that's telling you here. And moving here, all of this stuff that you see right here is stuff that I just told you, in fact. So there we go. Changing airspeed on a partial panel. These are power adjustments. Understand that when your aircraft is trimmed for straight and level flight, adding power is going to bring your nose up, and it actually brings your nose up because it pushes your tail down. Okay, remember how that horizontal tail plane works. And then again, a reduction in power is going to be a reduction in the amount of push down on your tail, so your tail lifts, your nose decreases. That's kind of what happens. So again, everything that you're doing on a partial panel, is nice and easy. No big changes in anything. Again, those heroic maneuvers to chase your airplane normally don't end well. And look at this. And this is talking about these power adjustments here on a partial panel. They call it PAT, power, attitude, trim. This is kind of what they're talking about here on these climbing. Oh, excuse me. God, that snuck up on me, guys. I apologize. And this is talking about a climb. You're adding power. You're watching those wings, making sure those wings are level. How do you watch the wings? In this case, you're looking at your primary here for bank here on your turn coordinator, and then you're also looking here for your support here on your bank, which is going to be this. Your pitch, you're going to notice a decrease in your airspeed. You're going to notice an increase in your VSI and an increase here in your attitude, your altimeter. Also, just another quick thought here on these partial panel things. Remember your scan. Let's say that you get your attitude indicator is now out of the picture. But Mr. R, you told us here from the very beginning, the attitude indicator is the alpha and the omega. All right, well, what do you do when the alpha and the omega is no longer in the picture? Well, now we're looking at other things, and this is where this primary for blah and the supporting for blah come into play. So with this, again, the primary for pitch is because of the power adjustments that you're going to be making here. Decrease in airspeed, an increase in airspeed, wings level here on your turn coordinator, and all of these words that I just used here describing this illustration. Here again, with this, maintaining the climb on a partial panel. This is going to be a thing here again with this airspeed coming down. It's kind of interesting that they're showing this airspeed kind of that low, but you know, it depends on the type of climb that you're making. In this case, right now, you're making about a 600 foot per minute climb. If you are in a partial panel situation and you are in the clouds, I am going to caution you about making climbs beyond 500 feet a minute. Those, you want to keep everything kind of in a small house, all of your control movements. And so with this, again, no descent too steep, no ascent too steep. Try to keep those things within 500 feet a minute in some of these smaller aircraft. Again, it shows you, this is an Avidyne panel here, and the Avidyne panel showing you've lost your attitude indicator, your heading indicator, but now you have your backup instruments here. In this case, useful piece of information here is your backup attitude indicator. Yay, go us. The difference is going to be this. In this particular illustration, notice this. Notice the difference here in your airspeed indicator here and your airspeed indicator here. Sloppy work, fellas. So that's kind of the thing that we're looking at. In the G1000, again, remember, all of these things, you could get red X's here and red X's here. That happens in the Diamond DA40. Your backup instruments are above your G1000, and I love it up there. In some of the other aircraft, they'll have your backup instruments in some of these locations that make it very difficult for you to see. In the 172 that I did most of my training in a 172, I did most of my flying has been in a DA40, but you know, there you go. In the 172 that I was flying, the backup instruments were down here level with my left knee. And it's like, why would they do that? Because here you are on a partial panel, here you are in something where you have some instrument failure, and oh, by the way, you're having to do this to kind of look down to sort of see where your instruments are. It is, again, another reason that we chose the Diamond DA40 is because you've got your primary flight display, multifunction display, and then right here, top center, is where you have your backup instruments. And having been in that situation where you have that failure in the clouds, it's very comforting to know that you don't have to be looking around down and, you know, at your knees for any backup instruments. They're right here. And that was comforting. Maintaining a climb, talks about that, leveling off from a climb. Understand that that with this leveling off from a climb, kind of how that's going to be. In this case, they're using an acronym here, the appointment acronym, APPT, and that is looking at your attitude indicator, pausing slightly. Why do you pause? You're going to pause there slightly to kind of regain some of that airspeed, let that airplane kind of get a little happy there, then adjust your power as necessary. In most cases, you're going to reduce that power slightly, and then you're going to trim it for hands-free flight. Again, small movements. Looking here. This is coming in here, leveling off here from a climb. You'll notice here that normally you're going to start leveling off from this climb about 50 feet before you get there. That's kind of the way it goes. Notice the change in the power setting here. So here you are, you're still coming here off a climb, you've got a higher power setting. Now then, you kind of reach your altitude, you're holding that there, you pause for just a minute, you're making your power adjustment here, and then your trim adjustment, right? So that's kind of what they're talking about there. The descent on the partial panel, again, they're using this power, attitude, trim. Remember what happens just as you reduce power. When you reduce that power, pressure on the tail plane is going to decrease. That tail's going to rise. That nose is going to start heading toward the terra firma there. Airspeed could increase. Airspeed may increase depending upon how you do it, but you want to reduce that power first. That should slow you down. Then allow that nose to start to come down. Here's a nice 500 foot per minute descent here, which is good. Notice the decrease in the power setting here. So notice all of the things at play in doing this. And guys, these are no different from all of the aerodynamics stuff that we talked about last semester. Again, this is where all this stuff comes back into play. Your knowledge of your instruments, your knowledge of aerodynamics. And that's what partial panel work is. That's what all flying is. Back here, come on. Okay, maintaining the descent. Again, you're adjusting that with the proper power setting, holding those wings level, and you are trying to maintain that no more than about a 500 foot per minute descent. Just before you get there and you're starting to level off, you're going to add some power back in, which is going to push the tail down, bring the nose up. And as you bring that power back in, leveling off from a descent, hopefully that's what they're about to tell us here, leveling off from a descent. Adding that power back in, that nose comes up slightly. We hold that, making sure that we're good, adjust our power, adjust the direction of our nose if we need to in any way, gently, 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 and then we adjust this trim for hands-free flight. And again, normally we're going to start to do that. They talk about a suitable lead time coming in off the descent. Normally with that, it's going to be about 10% of the rate of descent. So if you're thinking in terms of a 500 foot per minute descent, then again, about 50 feet above your target altitude is where you're going to roll that power back in where you had it. For normal cruise, that'll start bringing that nose up slightly without you having to do much here on the controls. And by bringing that power up, then that nose comes up. You massage that altitude as you need to there, just to kind of make sure you've got the proper altitude. Pause, make sure that everything looks good. Now you trim it for hands-free flight. Okay. When you are thinking about a go-around in a partial panel, you need to think of a go-around on a partial panel as an emergency situation. We talk about these things in training, and these go-arounds on a partial panel, these things, as they talk about in the book, should be avoided at all costs. You have a lot of things happening on a go-around to begin with. Trying to do a go-around on a partial panel is going to be a thing. Why do I bring this up? if in a partial panel situation, you're getting help from ATC, you want to at least be able to ask the question, and it may start with yourself. What airport is nearby that's going to give me the largest margin for error? Normally, it's going to be a big runway. It's going to be a big airport or a bigger airport. And the reason I say this, at smaller airfields, especially in the mountains, and again, it's just, all of these emergency situations are kind of different. One thing you don't want is to get 50 feet off the deck and to see that elk run across the runway here. Normally, larger airports, they're going to have more facilities for you. They're going to have more room to roam here, not for the elk or the wildlife, but for you, if you need it. Emergency services, okay? So those are things to consider when you're thinking about a partial panel approach. So again, just understand that a go-around, I don't want you to think about your airplane being on fire, like a go-around, if your airplane is on fire that's not happening. So I don't want you to think of it like that, but just understand is that if you elect to go around on a partial panel, yeah, that's tricky. So again, turning on a partial panel, we're going to talk about this here again. Standard rate, nothing more than standard rate, and I would also caution you that on a partial panel, I would even make it half standard rate. Here we go. And that heading indicator, that if it's working, then we can use that. If it's not, we're going to be using our compass. We have a clock, and again, that clock, we understand that if we're turning standard rate 45 degrees on something, we know that 180 degree turn is going to be in 1 minute, 90 degree turn is going to be in 30 seconds, 45 degree turn is going to happen in 15 seconds. Those are things that we just kind of lock into our head. So we know that when we start that turn, we are on a timer, and that's what that timer with the sweep second hand or the digital display, that's why we have it as far as an instrument certified aircraft. Magnetic compass, that's another thing. Oh, another thing, and I failed to tell you this as well. This was earlier. If you're turning toward VFR weather on a partial panel thing, remember the compass errors that we have. We have UNOS, remember that? Undershoot north, overshoot south kind of a thing? Because the compass tries to stay more steady on a northern type of a heading, and then south, it's going to be a little more twitchy. It's going to be a little more active. So in a southern heading like that, you're going to get a quicker compass response there to kind of make sure you're holding that turn. The book brought up a good point, and that was the fact that if you have a choice as to which way to turn for better weather, south may actually give you a quicker responding compass than a northern heading. East or west, it's a crapshoot, because east or west, it's going to be ands. It's accelerate, north, decelerate, and so the power settings are what's going to change your compass, not any turn that you may make. So that's kind of why you read that there. Before you enter that turn, make sure that everything is as stable as it possibly can be before you begin that turn, and that you are ready to make that turn, and you know what you're going to be looking for before you make that turn. So this is going to be the thing. You're going to get your timer ready. You're going to start your timer just as you start here to enter that turn here. Okay, and you're going to know what your bank angle, not necessarily the bank angle, but you're going to know here what kind of a heading change you're about to make, and you know what time you're going to make it. So again, 45 degrees is 15 seconds. Maintaining that level turn, You're going to know what it takes to maintain that level turn because that muscle memory that you have acquired from learning how to make level turns in that airplane, that is normally not that big a deal, but you're gonna remember what those are like when you're making those turns. Here again, this is what we're looking at, and they're talking again about this no gyro type of a thing, with the only gyro here being your being the being the turn coordinator. So here we are. We're slowly rolling into that standard rate turn into that bank, and again they're showing a standard rate bank. If it's me and I can, again, I'm going half standard rate. So if we think half standard rate, how long is a 45-second turn, how long is a 45-degree turn going to take us? Well, if standard rate is 15 seconds, how long is it going to take us to make a half standard rate 45-degree turn? Yes, 30. So this is what we're looking at here. Primary for pitch is going to be your altimeter. Supporting is going to be your vertical speed indicator. Your heading, this is our target here again, and this is showing standard rate. The nice thing here is showing the backup here on this Avidyne system, so that's also very useful. Rolling out on that turn, remember you're going to anticipate rolling out on that turn slightly so that you can roll out on the proper heading. Climbing turn on a partial panel. This is one thing here where the book and I kind of differ. If it's me in the real world, I'm going to try not to do two things at once. If I am on partial panel, and if I am required to make a turn and a climb or a turn and a descent, I am going to do everything I can to make my turn first, stabilize, then begin that descent, or then begin that climb. That's what I'm going to try to do. If for whatever reason you can't, here we go. This is kind of what we're looking at here. So that's why they're talking about this. So here, what they're showing you here is this climbing turn on this partial panel. So here we are, straight and level. Here, they've started the climb first. So they have begun a climb. Notice that your airspeed is here. Notice your VSI here. Notice a higher power setting here. You have begun this climb. Then they begin here, they begin the turn part of this. Here again, they've rolled into a left bank standard rate. They're at about 400 foot per minute climb here, still a higher power setting, climbing here, and we're noticing that our heading is changing here. Notice that we were on a heading here of about, on a heading of south, okay? So now you'll notice here that this is kind of what we're doing here now, where it looks like we're on a heading of about 120, okay? The descent on a partial panel, this is going to be another thing where they start the descent wings level first and then the turn on the partial panel next. It's kind of the opposite of what you just saw there. So they'll begin the descent wings level and then roll into that bank. In this case, they're going to right bank here. Notice the descent in the altimeter, about a 600 foot per minute descent here, lower power setting here, a little bit of an increase in airspeed here, and again, your timing. Partial panel in the glass cockpit. This is a thing here. Again, my children, in the glass cockpit world, if you have an instrument that fails, it's the red X's across everything here. You don't have the spool down effect that you have with analog instruments in a glass cockpit airplane. So when those fail, you are on your backup instruments. And that's what this is. Again, one of the reasons that we chose the aircraft that we chose was the positioning of your backup instruments. That's how important that is. And in the Avidyne system, it shows the backup instruments below the display. I liked it above the display. I liked it more prominent here, more so than down here where I'm looking down, you know, at my work. So that's it. AEROs, remember what AEROs is? The attitude heading reference system, that can fail. And there we go, guys. That is the end of chapter 29. As we look here back at the end of chapter 29, in these questions at the end of chapter 29, they will show you instruments and they will show you, here's what's going on. You need to interpret what is this telling you. Okay? So that's what these are. They'll ask you, what is the situation if these things are happening? This practice is solid gold. And then if you will look here, we are done because we've already done the weather. So now what? Well, here's the thing here, is that now we're ready to study for the quiz tomorrow. So where do you find the materials? If you look in big red, for instance, on the instrument stuff with your partial panel work, where are you going to find that? How about chapter 3 in the instruments section, right? Where are you going to find holds? Chapter 7 in the en route, kind of toward the end of the en route section there, going to find your holds. There may or may not be many, if any, questions about a procedure turn or about how to handle a DME arc. However, if I throw a DME arc approach question at you from some of the stuff that you have already studied, you'd be prepared to answer it, right? Yeah. A procedure turn question on some of those approaches, you'd be knowing how to answer it, right? Yeah, I'm sure you would. So those are things that you're going to find there. In your instrument section, also on chapter 3, you're going to have, for instance, remember the questions that you've already taken in chapter 3 about, what happens if you have, from an instrument standpoint with the gyro failure? What happens with the pedostatic failure? What about an unusual attitude recovery? What about those? Remember what an unusual attitude is. An unusual attitude is one of those things where you've been busy, you have been, for whatever reason, looking down somewhere, and then you happen to look up and you notice, oh my gosh, my airplane is in a descending turn toward the water, let's say. Understanding how to recover from those. And that's also covered in chapter 3 with those as well, the unusual attitude recoveries. So I want you to study the unusual attitude recoveries. They're also in chapter 3 of Big Red as well. Let's think about what's happening. If we know that our wings are not level and we're descending, what do? We're going to reduce power. We're going to roll out wings level. And then as soon as our wings are level, we're going to arrest the descent, and then as we arrest the descent, we're going to bring our power back in, right? What happens if we have an unusual attitude where our nose is up and we're in some form of a bank in that regard? Well, in that regard, then, depending upon what we're doing here, if we have power, normally it's a matter then of leveling the wings as we bring that nose level with the horizon. That's kind of what we're doing. And so when you look at those, the unusual attitude recoveries are going to make a lot of sense to you just kind of when you look at those. But I want you to be prepared for those as well, okay? So that's where you're going to find the questions for Wednesday. Now, after Wednesday, what are we doing? The first thing we are going to focus on is going to be Big Blue. We're going to focus on the test prep for the private pilot first, okay? That's what we're focusing on first. We're going to get spooled up and ready to go for the private pilot, right? Then, those of you that have decided to go ahead and take the FAA knowledge exam, we're going to knock that out as soon as you guys are ready. And it'll take you probably about a week to get ready to do the test prep portions to be ready to take the test. You are going to earn my signature in your logbooks by showing me 2 back-to-back practice tests with a score of 90% or better. That is when I sign your logbooks to get you ready to go to Grand Junction and take those exams. And we'll talk more about getting in there and the logistical element of taking that FAA knowledge exam next week. So that's what we're going to start on first. As soon as we're done with that, we go to the instrument exam. That may take about 10 days for us to be ready to take that exam, but we want to get ready to do that. It may not take that long as I think about this, because about somewhere around half of the instrument test involves private pilot knowledge. So it won't take that long. It'll take about 7 days, especially because some of that information is going to be fresher for you. So within about 2 weeks, you should be ready to take both of those examinations. We take the private first, then we do the instrument. Okay, those of you that are of age, ready to take those tests. If not, then we get ready to take the final. What's the final? The FAA knowledge exam. That's what it's going to be. Okay, so that's going to be how that works. So after our quiz on Wednesday, everything is about study, study, study. Okay? And after the quiz on Wednesday, I will show you how I want you to study for this exam. All right? So, guys, there you go. Awesome job. You just got through with a college level book and a lot of information. Okay? Well done. Now, we're going to learn how to take this test here, and so that's what comes next. Be ready for the quiz on Wednesday. Remember, it's going to be a Chapter 28, Chapter 29. I just showed you where to find the test questions for those. And after that quiz, and it probably won't be that many questions because I don't think there are that many questions on holds. I don't know. There may be 30 questions somewhere on that quiz, somewhere around 30 questions, I'm guessing, for Wednesday. So it won't take you that long if you're prepared to take this. And then we get into the here's how to study, and here we go with studying. Okay? So, guys, there you go. Have an awesome day, and see you tomorrow for the quiz.